I think sometimes we look for one specific function and we say, oh, this product does it, but we forget that we're paying extra for a lot of functions we don't use, or we're having to pay somebody else to do three functions that they could have done.
SC Media is proud to present this month's CISO Stories program. Each month, the CISO Stories program explores a cybersecurity topic selected by Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community and provides content that examines that topic from a variety of perspectives. Hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, best-selling author of CISO Compass, the CISO Stories weekly podcast features content powered by the 1,100-plus members of the Cyber Risk Alliance's CISO community. Listen to previous CISO Stories podcast episodes at CISOstoriespodcast.com. Cybersecurity Collaborative is a unique membership community enabling cybersecurity leaders to work together in a trusted environment. To learn more, visit CISOstoriespodcast.com/CSC. I'm your host, Todd Fitzgerald, and this week we welcome Patrick Benoit, Global CISO at Brinks. Welcome, Patrick.
Hey, Todd, how are you doing? I'm happy to be here.
Great to have you here. So I always like to ask, what attracted you to the cybersecurity field?
So a somewhat long and interesting journey. I will shorten it down, compress it down a bit. But I have been in IT since nearly the dawn of time. Punched cards and did all of that stuff back in the day on mainframes, and worked through being a developer and infrastructure and service management, project management, and everything else in between. And at some point, not that long ago, maybe 10 years ago, I realized that the saturation of, quote, IT people, IT management, IT leaders was very, very high. And it was time to maybe specialize. So I've owned security for many, many years under my remit, but I always had people working for me doing the security. So I decided I should focus more on cybersecurity directly. So I went that direction and built my from the skills I had, built my brand out of that.
So. Punch cards. Now you never dropped your deck or anything, did you?
I won't. I have heard that people have accidentally tripped and fallen and dropped many decks before, but I've never been involved in any kind of incident like that. So,
yeah, it's
at least
interesting.
Not that someone can prove. So.
Yeah, I probably dating myself as well. I had used to use it as a prop in one of my presentations. I had a punched card from back in my college days. So we've come a long way since then, haven't we?
Oh, definitely. It's and the acceleration, the rate of the velocity of IT is significant as it is, but in cyber, it's even faster.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, today we're going to be talking about a very important topic, which is total cost of ownership, point versus platform products. And I think this is something that, a lot of CISOs struggle with. How can we prioritize cybersecurity products strategically by, considering this total cost of ownership and making sure that we're still meeting the needs of our organization?
Well, and I think where we have had challenges in the past and not met those challenges happens to be in that we bought into this pipe dream, for lack of a better term, that best in breed point solutions were the only way to go. And so then we allowed a situation in the industry, not that we maybe could have prevented it, but we could have maybe not embraced it as quickly, that everybody who had a 1% solution for something created a new company, created a new product, hired all our best engineers, trained them on the 1% solution, paid them more money than anybody else could afford, and then cut them loose on the market. So we created our own talent shortage. We created our own, multitude of single points of failure with talent and with tools, because we have 14, 15, 16, 18 tools, pick a number, that are running our security environment. That whole thing was a pipe dream. We should have known up front that was an extreme position to take, that you can only run best of breed. So what we're seeing now is we're seeing the pendulum swing the other way. And we're starting to understand that there are greater benefits than just maybe cost optimization of the tool by looking at platforms, but also we gain benefits such as, if I go to a person and say, do you know XYZ platform? And they say, yes, I may have covered 3, 4, 5 functional type tools with that person's expertise instead of these 1% solutions and 1%, one trick ponies, so to speak, in engineering and security. So, I reduced my overall cost of ownership with talent. I reduced my overall cost of ownership with vendor management. I reduced my overall cost of ownership just in general. And hopefully, as we get to platforms, we're still making full use of all the functionality of the platform because we have very specifically and in a targeted manner said, I want to take this point solution that is providing me a service, and if I can get that same service in a platform that I already have, then I'm going to add that to the platform, and I still drive 80, 90+% usage of the platform. So I think there's a lot of benefit there.
Mm-hmm. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it is a struggle, and I know some firms. You mentioned the talent shortage. I know of a antivirus company, for example, that wanted to build data science and behavioral analytics into their product, but they couldn't find any data scientists. So they bought a company that was doing something completely different in data science. And they did that just to get the data science expertise. And then they had them pivot from what they were doing. And they were able to basically buy 20 of these data scientists by acquiring another company.
Yeah, and we see that kind of process all the time. We used to see it more oriented towards buying a customer base or buying specific IP for technology or for other IP that we might want to obtain. And then in many cases, you see the company taken apart and only the pieces that they want, used in the remaining entity.
Mm-hmm. So what sort of factors should CISOs be looking at when they're trying to, decide what type of solution they should be getting in their organization?
Well, as an example, let's make up a case where, and it's not far from almost anybody. So many companies are using Microsoft as their operating system of choice. For the most part, the predominance of it is Microsoft. And so if you're using predominantly Microsoft in your company, then does it really make sense to buy different products, different point products to do things like identity management? If your applications are Active Directory integrated and you're running all of that stuff through Microsoft, maybe you should give thought to using like a Microsoft Entra or Azure AD rather than paying for third-party products to do the same or similar functionality. Now, I'm going to couch that by saying, we have an expression in Texas, and I'll clean it up for the audience. I don't need a Ferrari to haul hay. I need a truck. And so, we have to be careful. Many of these point solutions have also become the Ferraris. They're the top right, farthest right quadrants in Gartner, and they are the Ferraris. And that's great. In many cases, I'm trying to deal with companies that are looking at basic maturity, basic evolution, and basic protections. And again, I don't need to go 150 miles an hour with Ferrari. I just need a truck that's going to get me from point A to point B and carry the stuff I need to carry.
Mm-hmm. And not promoting any one vendor's product, but because Microsoft is so prevalent, for example, that they include certain things in their enterprise, their enterprise licensing, and it was always felt they weren't the best to breed in those products, but they did the job. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, it is. And, I'm not going to make that assessment for anybody but the companies that I work for. But, I'm saying it's worth considering. If there is, and you bring up another good point, if in the licensure of operating system or the licensure of some other tool, you can add in or you get free functionality that you're already paying yet another vendor for, why are you doing that? Is there a specific function or critical business use case that requires the other solution? Why can't you just lose the solution you already own? And I think that's where we're going to get optimization, and we're going to avoid this duplication of functionality. I can never make that assessment as to comparability for anybody. Each company, each person, each CISO is going to have to make that decision on their own. Is it comparable to what I have, and am I okay with any differences that exist? Does it change our risk profile? Do we have the risk tolerance to accept any additional change in profile, in remedial risk, things like that? That's a decision they have to make in their assessment. But it's at least worth asking the question. And the second question is always worth asking is, am I using as close to 100% of the product that I'm paying for as possible? If I'm not, now you might have a reverse scenario where you have a platform, let's say, and you're only using 20 or 40% of it. Well, maybe it's time to take the functions for that 20 or 40% and go get point products and eliminate the cost of the 60% you're not using. So you have to look at it from all angles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I worked for a large global organization, as a CISO at one point in several points. And for this one particular company, we would get a team together that was a global team that would evaluate these different technologies and look at the global solutions. And you find that it really, some of them almost become like commodities, in that there's different bells and whistles on each one, but in terms of the core functionality, if you're looking for, say, vulnerability management, we'd look at the three that were in the finalists. They all did vulnerability management really, really well. It's just, where were they, and were they in the cloud? Were they not in the cloud? Were they, what functionality, what reporting did you get? So it's like the core mission. They all seem to do a good job at that.
Yeah, and we always want to, we are so ingrained with the idea of looking at, risk. We definitely want to do that. But what we've lost a little bit of is the old school methodology that was, in software development and everything else, the software development lifecycle, where we would say, okay, let's start with a business requirements document, a BRD. Let's define exactly what functionality we need and what's the measure of that functionality that we're looking for. Then let's do, a high level solution of how that's going to manifest itself, and then get into the technical programming requirements, the coding requirements, and so on and so forth. So I think sometimes we look for one specific function and we say, oh, this product does it, but we forget that we're paying extra for a lot of functions we don't use, or we're having to pay somebody else to do 3 functions that they could have done. And so I think we have to start from that basic business requirement point of view and remember that, security 101, right? It's like start at a basic place. Where's your basic hygiene? Where's your fundamental cybersecurity protections involved? And, fundamentally, vulnerability is a great one. Fundamentally, you have to be able to scan for all your vulnerabilities so that you can then help somebody remediate it to reduce your overall risk. So if it does 15 other cool things that are shiny, then I'm not sure if you're at a nascent time in your evolution, your maturity, that you should be looking at, again, the Ferrari. You're paying for paddle shifters because you want to go fast, but the speed limit's 40. So why?
And the more tools that we have, the more training we need, the more the difficulty it is to find people that know this particular tool versus the other ones. So how do we evaluate, if there's a product that say is more expensive? How do we evaluate if we think that its cost of maintenance is going to be less over its life cycle?
Well, and I mean, one of the first determinations is back to that requirements again and what you're trying to satisfy as a requirement. But then I think you have to make an assessment of what is the reasonable life cycle. And it's not necessarily a life cycle from a financial point of view, although you should consider it. But, the velocity of technology change in cyber is, it gets exponential. So it's changing all the time. So if I buy a product today, sometimes I feel like I'm at risk if I were to look at products and look at 3-year contracts, because I'm not 100% sure 3 years from now, you presume that company and that vendor and that product is going to keep up with time and change and everything. But what if they don't? And so I don't know if that's always viable. So I think you have to look at what is the reasonable life cycle in your business. Your business may be evolving. If your business has a strategy to pivot, like you were talking about, is what you're doing still going to be valid for that business once they're done pivoting? If not, why would you buy a product that would extend past the life of that? That has a very finite life cycle for that product, and you need to take that into account. So I think you have to look at it from a business point of view and stop looking at it as, wow, this is the coolest cyber product I ever saw, so I need to bring it in.
Mm-hmm. I mean, how do you protect yourself? So say that 3-year, looking 3 years out, and now 3 years you bought a relatively new product and you got it pretty cheap because they wanted customers,
Right.
and now you're at that 3-year juncture, and how do you protect yourself from those costs just going crazy on you that now you can't afford that product that you've embedded into your environment?
Well, and that's the key there. When you say embedded, you have to be careful that maybe you're laying it on top of, but you're not necessarily embedding. You're using it and it's part of your system, but you've architected your systems as a whole, your technology systems as a whole, so that certain functions can be much more plug and play. Never 100% plug and play, but the idea of ask yourself before you put something in place, what would happen if I had to take this out in a month? How would what would be involved in unwinding that? A lot of times that comes from the old idea of customize, which I think we've by and large gotten away from. We tend to stay off the shelf as much as possible. But also look at the number of integrations that are involved. If you have a product that doesn't require custom integrations on either side, then you can probably always have the sort of Damocles hanging over the vendor's head that says, well, I can change. In 30 days, I can change. And that's how you keep the cost at a reasonable level, is having the ability to be able to leave when you want to. The longer that cycle gets, if it's going to take me 6 months or a year to unwind myself, now it becomes even worse, because that means you're going to have to kind of tell them 30, 60, 90 days out, and you're going to have to keep a secret, so to speak, keep private that you're moving away from them for 6 months to a year. And that always gets out. And as soon as it gets out, you can bet that you're going to get charged at some point.
Well, I used to work for an airline many years ago, which runs one of our the major reservation systems that we book flights on today. And I remember they had 8 of the largest computers, and they had 6 IBMs, and they had 2 Amdals as the hot spares.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons that they had the Amdals there was, well, if the prices get out of line, we can always replace these other 6
Yeah.
we can bring in Amdahl and do that. So to keep that running good.
Yeah, and if you build in that scenario like that you're talking about, where you have multiples of something that are somehow supporting load or synced up or whatever the case is, where you can just put something in and then once it syncs up, you pull the other one out. Now, gosh, you're in a beautiful position because you have complete control over walking away anytime.
Yeah. So what are some of those key security platforms today that would be core for managing our security environments?
So, there are several companies that I'm seeing that movement to more of a platform. The most obvious, of course, being Microsoft. They've invested billions and billions of dollars on their security suite, and they have the advantage, frankly, of being able to, as we talked about earlier, wrap it into the operating system cost. So, hey, we're giving this to you free. Well, not really free, but we're giving this to you as part of your licensure. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. I guess I mean is like classes of platforms.
I
guess I'm thinking of functionality. What sort of functionality?
Yeah, I think where you're grouping the platforms together are like EDR or the endpoint detection response or XDR kind of platforms that also bring together some like DLP processes. Maybe it brings together, maybe there's some tie-in to CASB processes. You're controlling data as it flows throughout the network with the endpoint. Maybe there's some, you're getting some risk, some intelligence, threat intelligence and threat hunting capabilities that come out and are part of that. I can see where those could be grouped together fairly reliably, tied together with maybe your SIM and tied together with maybe you have managed detection response. So, and I see some companies are starting to do that.
So much more of a integrated approach, and do you find then the talent is easier to find for those platforms?
Well, I think it's too early to tell, and so right now I think it's theoretical, and you know how that goes. But it would seem to me that if I walked into someone and said, "Hey, do you know XYZ platform?" and it satisfies 4 or 5 of my functions, where I used to have 4 or 5 different point products, and I had to have engineers that happen to know more than one of them or one for each specific one, I gotta feel like that's going to be an improvement. Mm-hmm. And it's also, I think, ultimately, engineers don't want me to say this, right? Ultimately, it probably drives the price down to a more moderate level for that talent too, because you're not having to pay a premium for each specialized talent. And we get back to a more of it's not really a generalist, it's not really a specialist, it's kind of a quasi-specialist in that they're a specialist, but they're a specialist on 4 or 5 different things in one platform. So I think that will help moderate some of those costs for talent too.
Sure. Well, this has been great, Patrick. I think this is such a key issue today that you go to some of these conferences and you look at all the products, and it's just it's a big headache to try to figure out which products do I really need, how much overlap do I have. I forget, how many tools an average organization has, but it's some organizations is in the hundreds, thousands. Some it's less than that, but everybody's trying to manage so many tools.
Yeah, but to me, even 20 would be too many. I mean, it's just too many. Maybe it's 5 platforms instead, and I don't know what the ideal number is. It's almost like quality. You'll know it when you see it. So when we start to get there, we'll start to understand what that right consolidation looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so what final advice would you give to CISOs, emerging CISOs, current CISOs, new CISOs, experienced CISOs as they're trying to, figure out the right total cost of ownership and decide between point and platforms?
Well, I mean, part of it has to do with where you focus your learning and your studying. And I tell all, especially aspiring CISOs, that if you're still If you're still spending 80 or 90% of your time studying technical stuff, you're probably not getting the best bang for your buck, because you are hiring people that know the technical side of things. Your responsibility now falls on the business side of things. So, start to make sure you're well educated and informed and proficient at finance and marketing and sales and operations and those things, and start taking that kind of a view to apply to your optimization of your tool set, deployment of your tool sets, and things like that. Let's get away from this idea that we want one standard tool to rule everything endpoint. Maybe not. Maybe it's two or three, and maybe your position is that you say to various business units, almost a play on Henry Ford's deal, which is you can have any product you want as long as it's one of these three. So give them some choice where it makes sense, so that they can feel like they're buying into it too, and that they're invested and that they have ownership. So study business.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great advice, because I'm thinking about going to executive management and explaining the pluses and minuses of this tool and that tool. I really don't care. It's really what's going to be the least amount of cost over time to get your job done.
Oh, sure. And the thing that is difficult is, and it's almost a dirty little secret and doesn't get spoken about that often that I've heard, but a cyber program is an insurance policy. You cannot, prove the null hypothesis. You cannot prove that by spending X dollars on security that you will directly reduce specific risks. Now, you can make some presumptions. You can do some calculations and some estimates that say, we believe based on industry trends and this and that, these things are standards that everybody believes helps reduce those risks. But in the end, it's that idea of if nobody ever breaks into your house, were your door locks effective or not? I don't know. So it's an insurance policy, and sometimes it's very difficult to sell an insurance policy. Life insurance only benefits the living after you're dead. So,
well, and I think of your company, for example, is pretty much an insurance policy, isn't it? It's an extra level of protection.
Well, any kind of protection or security, physical or otherwise, is going to be you're trying to mitigate the risk through some method, and so but ultimately it's an insurance policy.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it. Thanks a lot, Patrick.
It's my pleasure. I'm honored to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode of the CISO Stories podcast. Please subscribe to the CISO Stories podcast, and you will receive a new story each Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll see you next week for a new episode.